Africa is going to be generating 4 million young unemployed people per month for the next decade into the job market. 4 million young people. We are a young continent. Therefore, we must focus on job creation. We must focus on digitalization because these are young, it's a young population. We must give them, captivate them, but also then make them that very productive team. What do we see? These conflicts are no longer just about Africa. They're now global. The Gaza, the Middle East, in Europe. When you look at the resource allocation through parliaments in Europe and the US, what we are looking for, even within the context of IDA alone, the 130 billion, is actually a drop in the ocean in comparison to the resources that have gone into conflict through this parliament. So this is a very serious contradiction. And we always say that capital follows peaceful areas where there's stability and so forth. But we are now seeing a reverse, where capital is actually following conflict instead of the other way around. So this, again, in my view, calls for further scrutiny and research through this partnership and others. Another grim statistic is that connectivity is so important for our Africa trade because data, even within the African Union, shows that 30% of Africa's trade is internal within the continent. But Africa trades 70% with the external world. So we must do something to enhance intra-African trade. And that is why the African trade, continental free trade area becomes crucial. India, for instance, I was talking to the Minister for Infrastructure some time back, and he says that in the last 10 years of the Modi regime or tenure, and I'm not campaigning for him here, they're having an election though, they have been able to add 40,000 kilometers of electric rail to their infrastructure. The question is, how much rail have we added to our infrastructure in Africa to enhance connectivity in the last 10 years? In Nairobi, the commitment is that we hope the international community can raise up to 120 to 130 billion US dollars to support 75 IDA-based countries, 40 of whom are in Africa. So you can see there is a crisis. The last IDA raised 90, that is the Dhaka initiative. So the Nairobi initiative is looking at 120. So I would want to really urge that through this effort, and the Nordic countries are also very strong participants in this area, your support, your intervention in mobilizing these resources internationally will be extremely helpful. In the context of the African Development Bank and the African Development Fund, your voting power is about 4.3%. And in the last replenishment, you are able to give close to 700 million US dollars. I think it would be important that this forum also urges you to participate, because within the ADF, the target is to shift from 10 billion US to 25 billion US under the ADF, the African Development Fund. And these are really concessionary funds. And that is where we have had challenges. African countries need to focus more on the receiving and utilization of concessionary funding. So that is a very critical aspect that I think going forward should constitute a significant aspect of your strategy. As we focus, let us really zero in on issues that will have a bigger buy-in from the citizens of Africa, particularly the young and impatient population that may not know a lot of other things. We were in Zimbabwe recently, and I am happy the AU raised something about it. But if you look at the sanctions that have hit Zimbabwe, the people who may have caused the sanctions are dead. And the people who are now being punished by the same sanctions, 24 years later, have no idea what caused it. So when are sanctions enough? And when do sanctions cease? I close my case. So there must be a more deliberate conversation on the issues of conflict. As we speak today, not too long ago, there was a meeting in Paris to raise humanitarian support for Sudan. $2 billion were committed. Now, this is for humanitarian intervention. It's not to build schools, it's not to build hospitals, it's not to build roads or rail, but to deal with conflict. So we must take conflict very seriously going forward.
My senior brother, Minister Mudavadi, mentioned that every month you have 4 million Africans entering the job market. This, if there is to be a headline, this should be an every month, 4 million enter job market. So with those numbers, apart from climate, I believe African jobs will be the next defining challenge of our era. And African jobs actually is not an African problem. It's a challenge for all of us, given the demographic trends that we see.
I see the need for investment in 4 areas: value addition, particularly agriculture; mineral beneficiation; infrastructure development for both social and economic development; climate change adaptation and environment; and the third area, I think, should preoccupy us in the next is how do we improve trade between Africa and the Nordic countries? Because we do know aid will not develop Africa, trade will.
Nordic and African cooperation extends well beyond this forum. We have a long and a strong tradition for working together in international settings. And I think we should continue this cooperation. World organization must reflect the world of today, not as it once was. Therefore, the Chair's summary emphasizes the need for fundamental reforms of the UN Security Council and the international financial architecture. It calls for a strengthened access to development and climate finance. And I hope all of you who are present here today will support the very strong message to be sent from us to the Summit of the Future. And this is definitely what the Danish government wants to do this year. As many of you know, we are drafting our new Africa strategy. The deadline will be in August, and this meeting fit in very properly, where we want to shift the direction of our engagement, take it to another level. That is also why Denmark is proposing at this year's meeting we are trying something new, to establish a greater focus on follow-up, as well as on trade and investments. To get us started, we have introduced 3 innovations. First, we have encouraged all delegations to bring along business representatives. After last year's meeting, there was a clear demand for more focus on economic partnerships. And I'm pleased and happy to see many of you have taken up this invitation. Hopefully, the African-Nordic business meeting tomorrow will be fruitful. We will seek to identify concrete ways to promote trade between our regions and to create jobs through investments. So the opportunities for investment in Africa countries are, to say the least, promising.